Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, protest music, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and this is my co-host, Mr. A. So, Mr. A, how are you going today?
I am very well, 4AS. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm going pretty good. First of all, it is around the holidays, so happy
Mm-hmm.
Easter.
All
And
right.
yeah, I guess we have an interesting topic today, but before we get into that, I thought with your recent video about Marx and Lenin, I
Mm-hmm.
thought it would be apt
Mm-hmm.
to give you a bit of a right of reply because it seemed as though it was people agreed with you, quite a few people disagreed with you, so
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would be apt to give you a right of reply.
Thank you very much, 4AS. Only someone with your level of etiquette and empathy would allow someone like me to have an opportunity to explain myself. So,
Mm.
thank you so much for the opportunity. Look, controversial much. Okay, I don't know if our listeners have had a chance to see the video in question. It's titled, "This is Why Marx Would Have Hated Lenin." So, yeah, controversial, savage response um, in the comments. But, compared to my usual content, it went off, you could say. So it was obviously,
Mm.
yeah, it obviously struck a chord with a lot of like potential revolutionary slash Marxist, Leninists, whatever the hell you want to label yourself. But like, I just would like to call everyone revolutionaries because it makes me feel all warm inside. So yeah, it struck a chord with a lot of revolutionaries, but like it was pretty divided, might I say. I think the like to dislike ratio is like 57% or something like that. 57 being in favor of the likes, but like, my channel averages on probably about, I don't know, 80% like to dislike. So it was very divisive, this video. So
Yeah.
I guess I should give people some context. So basically, I structured the video in a way to kind of explain, using a hypothetical situation, of course, that, if Marx and Lenin existed in the same time period, why Marx would have ripped Lenin a new one on some of
Mm.
their revolutionary understandings and their, understandings on statecraft and democracy, nationalism, all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, I detailed those points. And yeah, like for example, like I talk about how Marx's revolutionary theory is different to Lenin's approach to revolution, where Marx was all about, creating or ensuring a society um, in transition from capitalism to socialism and then on to hopefully communism. You'd have something like the dictatorship of the proletariat, so the absolute rule of the working class as a
Mm.
class dominating over all other classes, so especially the bourgeois class, where Lenin was different to that in the sense that his idea was a dictatorship of the proletariat led by a centralized party or a vanguard, if you will.
Mm.
So like different approaches there based on similar premises, but like I think that Marx's take on that was having people politically organized in a way that the entire class is enfranchised by that process, as opposed to just having a centralized group of people running the show on behalf of the working class. I think that's
Mm.
a very poignant distinction there, that I don't think people really analyze or critique much, because like Lenin is held up on this kind of pedestal, and like, he's given godlike status and we must all, salute as we walk past and all that sort of stuff. So like to say that there may be a difference of opinion between Marx and Lenin is controversial. So like that was, that was heavily criticized in the video. Like his stance on, nationalism. So like, Lenin kind of was one of the forerunners of like the idea of socialism in one country. He tabled the idea, which was obviously put into practice by Stalin later than that. But like he started to feel that, because things didn't turn out the way they had expected, then they had to really concentrate on Russia, where Marx was an internationalist, a devout internationalist. There was no borders, and like socialists across the world would unite, for the aims of the working class, where, Lenin ended up helping. His legacy was, a society built in Russia, and the Soviet Union. So there was a difference kind of between Lenin's legacy and what Marx had kind of envisaged for the working class movement. On democracy as well, like Lenin's practice and legacy kind of, centralized things and made democracy specific to the rules of the party, where like, Marx was, I think, openly democratic, like within reason, again, within the shape of the dictatorship of the proletariat. So he was very much all for working people's autonomy in the political process and their involvement in the political process. Like you can't have a revolution without people being involved. Like all of the working people being involved in like things like the actual Soviets, like the actual workers' councils and organizations, grassroots from the bottom up, where like, Lenin's legacy is centralized party politics and democracy for people within the party system. Like they ended up dissolving and eroding the Soviet system. So like, again, I think there's a disparity there about, what Marx had envisaged and what ended up actually happening in practice. Like that follows on to pluralism as well. Like Marx was
Yes.
pluralistic, I think, or more pluralistic than Lenin was. Like Lenin very much believed that you couldn't have the disorganization that pluralism causes. He uses, other revolutions as examples and stamped out political pluralism, stamped out a lot of the opposing socialist parties, as well as like not only just like opposing like bourgeois classes or political groups and all that sort of stuff. They shut down other socialist and revolutionary parties to ensure the Bolsheviks had that control and that dominance. Where Marx, like, when he started doing all of his work, he got the International Working Men's Association together, and there was lots of factions and difference of opinions, and like, he was up there debating people and telling them what he thought. Like, don't get me wrong, he was a fierce opponent and shut a lot of people down, but he allowed them a space to speak. As much as he probably hated them, he still, got them involved. Solidarity was a thing, was a big thing, as opposed to kind of
the great debates between Bakunin and Marx.
Yeah. And like, they didn't like each other, but they shared the same space a lot of the time, which is different to what happened under Lenin and the Bolsheviks. So like things like that. And like that just seemed like incredibly controversial. And like, people were just angry about that. Like, you read a lot of the comments, like people were
Yes.
furious that you
Well,
could like be a Marxist or understand Marx and have an opinion that isn't the typical narrative, that it's just like, oh, Marx or Lenin, natural progression. Like, they're really one of the same thing. Like, how dare you say that Marx would have hated Lenin? Like, obviously that was in jest, like hypothetical. Like, I don't actually know whether Marx would have hated Lenin. Maybe Marx and Lenin would have got on like a house on fire. I don't know. But like, if you look at like some of the stuff that they both did, their works and like Lenin's legacy, there's a lot of differences there for us. But like that upset people a lot. It was quite entertaining to see that.
Yes, and I'll add. I'll at least go into the two major questions that came out of that
Mm.
comment section. Let's
Yeah.
go for the one that, well, I personally feel like is lazy, but it's a decent question nonetheless. Um, in order to reach your conclusion, what were your sources, Mr. E?
Oh yes,
And
so many of those.
and then
No,
number
no, no. Better,
two,
better than that. Come on,
and
better than
number
that. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, sorry.
And number two, which is, look, I think it's a valid pushback, but again, I kind of feel like it's a lazy pushback because Stalin was the right hand man of Lenin.
Mm,
But a lot of your critiques of Lenin, people are like, "Oh, well, Stalin was responsible for that, like the
mm, mm.
one nation policy, blah blah blah." Again, what would you say to those kind of statements that were
Right,
basically
right.
putting all of the blame on Stalin?
Well, like, look, the first one, let me just unpack the first one, which is hilarious.
Yeah,
It's just like, what are your
yeah,
sources? But like, better than that, a lot of the comments were just like, ha, he's never read Marx in his life, or he's never read like theory in his life. You can tell that this guy's never read theory. One of them was so good. It was like, say, like, um, has only ever read like Wikipedia articles on Marx, like kind of thing, once or something like that. And like I was very sarcastic in the commentary, like just to like, because like some of those things, like how do you answer that sort of thing? Like, do you want me to just literally list everything that I've ever read and then go through all of the books and have to give out quotes for everything that I say, which is a very kind of uh, typical Marxist infighting or socialist infighting kind of response to things. Unless you've got 5 sources from Marx to back up that statement, don't say it. And I had like a little argument in the chat with someone who was just like, well, you can't have that opinion, like kind of thing, unless you have sources. And I was just like, well, you've just given me your opinion. Do you have any sources for that? And they weren't able to answer the question, like very
yeah,
sarcastic
yeah,
response. But like, why is he allowed to have an opinion, or why is that person commenting allowed to have an opinion which they've formed off their own volition? Why are they allowed to have an opinion? Why do I have to back everything up with sources? And I asked him, do you have any sources for that? And like, they didn't really respond to that. But like, it's funny because I think people are very indoctrinated into a certain way of thinking. Like, we went once incognito to a Marxist, what would you
yep.
describe it as? A conference, right? A
Look,
Marxist
yes,
conference.
it was, and what I would say about that was we expected it to be a bunch of university students LARPing Marxism, and I think we were surprised by the fact that it was a bunch of uni students LARPing at Marxism.
Well, yeah, but like it basically was a cult of sorts. And like, I hate when people like you hear right wing people attack like communism stuff, and they're just like, it's a cult, like they're just brainwashed and stuff. But like, a lot of these people, I think, are brainwashed. They hear or get taught Marxists' work and theories and Lenin's work and theories and stuff. They get taught in a particular school or a particular way of thinking. And a lot of these Marxists that we were talking to at this conference, like, they hadn't actually really read Marx, or they'd read like excerpts or quotes of Marx given to them by their like overlords and like their leaders in these organizations, and like they hadn't actually read the original text themselves. They'd been told what to think about it by other people. Like, I don't know about you, I think we have a similar kind of introduction to revolutionary theory and culture and all that sort of stuff. We kind of just picked up the books ourselves and read it.
Yeah.
And do you remember when we got to that conference? Like, we were basically shadowed the whole time by
Yep.
like, we had chaperones because they were suspicious that we would just buy tickets to this event like out of the blue. And they thought we were like undercover, like, I don't know, right wing extremists, and we were going to like shoot up the place or something like that. And so they chaperoned us the whole day. And like by the end of the day, we were kind of like, they were like, well, how did you even find out about this anyway? And we were like, well, we saw it online and we're interested in this, and we thought we'd come along. Like, is that an offense? And they're kind of like, well, they just looked at us and they were like, people don't actually do that. People don't,
Yeah,
read
I remember
Marx for
that.
themselves and then just come along to a Marxist conference. And I was like, well, how do people usually come along to these for the first time? And they're just like, well, they're tapped on the shoulder by an existing member and asked to come along to be, I don't know, as part of a hazing ritual or something like that, and to be, initiated into the club. And we were threatening to them because we just picked up Marx and Lenin, socialist theory and stuff like that, and then just decided to go along out of interest. And we had formed our own opinions, and it was scary for them. Like, I remember you
Mm.
debating someone who had read, like, I think it was Trotsky's.
It was permanent
It was
revolution.
it was Permanent Revolution, and
Mm.
like you made a comment that he talks about the Australian Labor Party in there as a shining example of socialist organisation in the Great Down Under, and like the
Yeah.
person was just like, oh wow. I had no idea Trotsky had talked about the Australian Labor Party. And like that was
No,
like
that was not his.
mind shattering. No, no.
That was not his response at all. His response at all was to his eyes to bug out, his mouth to be open, and he's like, "No, that can't be possible. What
No.
talking positively about the Labour Party? How is that
Yeah,
even possible?" And
yeah,
like him just
yeah,
completely freaking out. I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, mate. No, that's fine.
Mm,
Let me find the specific page again.
mm,
I can look into that. Like
mm,
he was like so overwhelmed by
mm.
me bringing up
And and this
this
was
fact.
and this was a senior-ish member in this cult.
Yeah,
And like
yeah,
his response to that was like quite visceral, like how you're
yeah,
describing it. Like he was
yeah.
shaking and it was just like, no, no. And it's
Mm.
like, when was the last time you read any theory for yourself instead of just regurgitating what you've heard in one of your little like sessions where you sit around and circle jerk each other and tell each other how wonderful you are and like just spit out little quotes that just match your stuff? When did you actually sit down and digest Marx or Lenin and or Trotsky or whoever it is that you guys, are assuming to be like? When was the last time you actually critically analyzed it for yourself? And I found that a
Mm.
lot of these comments were very generic Marxist, Leninist, or socialist comments that just get regurgitated all the time. Like, this is the storyline about the natural progression of Marx to Lenin, etc., etc. And like, you can't question that. And when you do, like, people's worlds start shattering and they get aggressive. There's a lot of aggressive commentary in there, like, you should be ashamed of yourself, and like people calling me a Trotskyist and like an anarchist and like
A
all of
revisionist.
these a
Yeah,
revisionist and like all of these
yeah.
things that are like, you're not a pure Marxist, and no Marxist would ever say things like that. And it's just like, well, what is a Marxist? Like, what is a purist form of interpreting someone's writings and their understandings of the world?
Mm.
Lenin's writings, Lenin's legacy. Why can't you form your own opinions on this sort of stuff? And like, that is a pretty stock standard response to indoctrination. Like, if you told a Christian or something that God doesn't exist, their immediate reaction is to defend what they understand, not think about it critically. You know, this is earth shattering stuff that you're telling them, and like, their impulse is to fight you on it. And that's
Mm.
the theme of a lot of the commentary there, especially like, where's your sources? You have no idea what you're talking about. And the better one to that being the, oh, well, you've obviously never read Marx ever. Like, or you've never read Lenin ever.
Mm.
And that is a massive assumption in itself. But like, whatever. Like, if that's how you you deal with hearing stuff that opposes your worldview, then mate, good luck to you. I hope that you sleep well at night getting that off your chest. But like it was just a very, very interesting exercise. What was the other type of commentary that you're saying? Oh, about like, oh, like Lenin didn't do that, Stalin did it. Like, is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
the
yeah,
one?
yeah,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
that's fair. Like, there's a lot of stuff that like, and if they, and I responded like this as well. Like, look, if you actually listen to what I'm saying, I said that like, Lenin initiated some of this stuff. Like he brought it to the table, and maybe Stalin developed it later. But like, these were ideas that were circulated during the time of Lenin and broached by the man himself. So like, whether you like it or not, he did have a hand in some of this sort of stuff. And like people just didn't like that. They really, like I said, like it seems that if you want to be in the club of socialism or something like that, then you got to appreciate Marx and Lenin as this kind of progressive step by step kind of process. And like, if you look at like what was happening during the time of Lenin and the
Mm.
formation of the Soviet Union, pre and post that, like there wasn't consensus. Like there wasn't all these people that are just like, oh yeah, he's got the right idea, old Lenin, and like everyone just went with that. Like there was a lot of challenging of Lenin's ideas. There were a lot of other political factions within the socialist movement that completely disagreed with what Lenin was
Mm.
about and the Bolsheviks were about. And a lot of Lenin and the Bolsheviks' job, and like Lenin was open about this, was like stamping those people out. Like his
Mm.
theory was like, let's just say it was from a place of good intention, was look, we can't be disorganized if this is going to work. So you got to stamp out your opposition.
Was
So
was the
like
White Army immediately on them, or was that later down the track?
the Civil War, it was
Yeah,
pretty much
yeah,
from the outset. It was pretty
yeah,
much
yeah,
from the
yeah,
outset. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Which brings to your point, like it kind of makes sense why he he
Yeah, like
booted the
it's
troops
from
in
a
line.
place. Yeah, it's from a
Yeah,
place of like, let's say, good intention. Let's just be optimistic about it then.
yeah,
He needed to do something and he did it. And like I explained that as well. Look, he's a great revolutionary. He
yeah.
understood revolution. If you want to start something in a place and it's probably not ready, it's premature, as I described it, which people didn't like. Like, you got to take some extreme measures and you got to do some things that are like outside the idealistic way of doing something in a socialist fashion, which would be creating a system where the workers have control, not a party, not like one section of the working class movement. It's you, but like if you want to effectively revolutionize society, yeah, you're probably going to have to be pretty cutthroat about it and pretty brutal in terms of who's in and who's out, because you got to get things moving.
Well, this is where your concept of it being premature comes in, because this is another aspect of, I remember when we did go to that Marxist conference, that people didn't seem to like is
Mm,
uh, you were like, I remember you making a comment along the lines of, well, Marx didn't completely hate capitalism. He saw it for what it truly was, and people were like, wait, what? No, of course he
yeah, yeah,
hated
yeah.
every aspect about capitalism, and we were like, no.
No, yeah, yeah. Like,
He realized that you, in order to go from a feudal society to a socialist society, you need the mechanism of capitalism as a stopgap to get your way to
yes,
the withering of the state. So you
yeah, but
needed
like,
the mechanism and the capitalist mode in order to start the production
$100%.
production process, and then to work your way to socialism and then the withering away of the state. But
hundred
like
percent.
they were like, no, no, every aspect about capitalism is bad. I was like, no,
Yeah,
wait, have
yeah.
you not read
And like
Marx?
and that's the thing. And more than, it's not just him like using his putting his historical materialism hat on and being like, you need to have capitalism to get to communism, like kind of thing. It was more than that. He openly states that like capitalism is like wonderful. Like what the productive capacity of the capitalist mode is so fruitful and so wonderful. It's raised the living standard. It provides more commodities for all. It increases our livelihoods, our longevity as humans. But like that is that's great, but like we can do better. But like he never said that capitalism was just flat out evil in the sense that like it was like you said, like these people were saying, oh, there's nothing good about it out there. He completely understood how that he completely understood the wonders of the capitalist mode and what it has done for the human race. But like it was like it stops there. Like okay, we understand and we acknowledge that it's great, it's been very productive, but like we need to move on from that and make sure we have better working conditions and living conditions for all. That's where it falls short, and like that's the intention of socialism and communism, to help use the productive forces of capitalism and advance them in a way that like we have true equality for the first time in human history since we moved into more complex societies. So like, and that was complete anathema to these people. Like they were disgusted by like that, and they were like, "No, you can't say that. Capitalism is evil," and it is. Don't get me wrong, but like it's been a wonder to the human race in terms of revolutionizing our productive capacity. And I don't think anyone can really take that away. And like Marx, I thought he was pretty open about that. Like, read the Communist Manifesto. Like, a good portion of that is him saying it's pretty crazy what has been achieved in the last couple of 100 years. But what do we do now? That's the real question that's being posed. So, like, a lot of this stuff, I feel like in terms of the commentary, like negating all of the things that I've said in this video, comes from a place of complete indoctrination. People have been told a story about what it is to be a socialist. People have been told a story about what it is that Marx's revolutionary theory was. And they might have read theory for themselves, but did they actually go to the source? Did they read other people's opinions on Marx and Lenin? Or did they actually read Marx and Lenin for themselves? Because like a few of the comments, like they wrote some essays in there. And when you read the comments that they're providing, the quotes that they're providing, like they are relevant. Okay. Like some of them are quite poignant, but like it's like when people, religious extremists, for example, pick parts of the Bible or the Quran or something like that to justify them killing other people or, suppressing women or something like that, or living in a patriarchal society. Like they pick excerpts and interpret them in a way
Yes.
that suits their arguments, which I guess is what everyone does to a degree. But like, if you read those excerpts for yourself and come to your own conclusions on them, that is much better than reading that excerpt with a preconceived notion just to suit your arguments. You must have more of an open mind with this sort of stuff. And like, I feel like in this day and age, like as far as we've come, like Lenin and what happened with the USSR and all that sort of stuff, like that started over 100 years ago now. Like that is gone. We need to let go, I think, of Lenin's legacy and see it for what it is: a revolutionary tale and a socialist experiment. We need to
Yes.
see it for what it is. I think the thing that makes like Lenin socialist is not the fact that it is socialist, but that it was anti-capitalist. That's all. There was the capitalist world order and the East, or the communist describing countries. And they labeled themselves as communists or socialists in opposition to capitalism, not because they were actually socialist or communist. They were anti-imperialist and anti-Western nations. And that's the thing that makes them socialists, I think.
Yes.
Not the fact that they are actually, following the principles of socialism or something like that. Because at the end of the day, like one of the comments I had was just like, socialism is so complex. Like you can't say it's one thing or another. And it's like, well, no, it's not. It's been made complex. But socialism is not complex at all. It's about giving the working class the upper hand slash allowing them the turn to be the dictatorship. And dictatorship is a bastardized term these days. But like dictatorship in the time of Marx and the early socialists and all that meant just one group of people above another, not like an evil dictator like, Hitler or something like that. That's not a dictatorship. A dictatorship is just when one group of people controls or rules over another. And I think that's what socialism is more about, like giving the working class the decision-making power and making sure they're the dominant class in society, as opposed to having the bourgeois in control of society. And that's pretty much it. But like,
Yes.
what happened with the Bolshevik Party was not the entire working class getting together in Russia and deciding what was happening. It was a section of the working class in a centralized party, in a vanguard, deciding what the working class was going to do. Very different. Very different, I think.
Honestly, I feel with this discussion, honestly, I haven't thought about that Marxist conference until you brought it up just then,
That was
and
hilarious.
just like and just your I guess your experience with your recent video.
And they were Trotskyists, if you remember, which is funny.
Yes,
Because
they
they were
were.
as
I think.
dogmatic as the people in the comment section, but all the people in the comment section on this video were just like, "Hey, he's a Trotskyist, get him!" Like kind of thing,
Yeah, yeah.
And like, am I? Or are you just superimposing one of your little, infighting socialist hate speeches that you love to, spiel off on all the time, and just superimposing it on this discussion? Like, what indication did I give you that I was a Trotskyist? I think
Yeah, I
Trotsky
think
loved Lenin.
I think somebody called you Frank Ebert.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
who was I think a German politician from around that time. So yeah, I had to look him up because as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, who's that?
yeah.
But I guess this might be a good segue. Like this, I guess this talk about sectarianism is that I was reading a recent book by David Harvey called The Ways of the World, which is basically
How recent? How recent? Like
um I've got the book here. It
David
came
Harvey's got
out
to be in like his 90s now. He's such a machine.
2017, but I think it's like a selection of
Yeah, wow.
works from all of the essays that he's kind of done.
Yeah,
And one
nice.
of them in there, which I think came out in the late 1970s, was one that was called uh, Militant Particularism and the Global Order. It was something like that. And he recounts in the early 1970s, he was in Oxford and he was on this academic working group that was covering the Cowley factory, which was basically like a Ford-esque car manufacturing factory. And they had people from the unions that had academics that were looking as to how the factory works. And doing research in the benefit of the union and that sort of thing. And throughout it, what David Harvey actually found is not only did he want, he was a socialist, he was a Marxist, he wanted to do what was best for the union workers, but also he noticed various other aspects and inefficiencies that the Cowley factory were doing that weren't necessarily to the I guess the factory as well as the workers' benefit in the long run. So like the big thing he found was, well, actually what they're doing is kind of shit jobs. And like them having to do like this one task day in, day out, he didn't think that was good for the workers. Neither the materials that they were working with were causing massive amounts of environmental degradation. And he was like, well, maybe you should improve your processes with this sort of thing and do X, Y, and Z. But what he actually found with a lot of the other, union academics that he was with, he was basically told to pull his head in, where it's like, oh, we're doing this project for the benefit of the workers. Why are you causing all of this, this hoo-ha about this? And effectively, he eventually was like, oh, hey, like, I'm trying to help here. I'm not trying to, like, rock the boat or anything. But he uses this as a basis of his analysis of going into this author around the time called Raymond Williams. And what Raymond Williams is, he's basically like a oil. He's like Upton Sinclair, where he uses novels in order to talk about like political issues of the day and everything. And this guy Raymond Williams, his big novels cover what he calls militant particularism. Now, before neoliberalism and everything, obviously, the unions were doing quite well. All I guess the working class movement was kind of in its prime post, FDR and that sort of thing. And what he focuses with this idea of militant particularism is that a lot of these solidarity movements are place and space oriented. And as soon as you move against these kind of solidarities, suddenly there can be this very us and them mentality, or belonging and not belonging ideas to them. And you find that you have conflicting loyalties if you try and move in and out of these spaces. And I find that quite interesting, him talking about this, because I think that kind of holding on to ideologies, it seems very relevant in our post-neoliberal world where, hey, in a lot of places, both in Western countries and Eastern countries, or if you will, global North and global South countries, where the unions have died down. People don't really aren't really related to the working movements anymore. If you do have people that are within these workplaces, or at least this place-based stuff, so whether it's unions, whether it's community wealth building, like, they are focused within places. But because that kind of foundation has been rummaged with from under them, they're still holding on to the ideologies that these places kind of sprouted up from. But the irony of the situation is that because these things were very place and space oriented, as soon as you try to abstract them outwards, suddenly you get conflicting loyalties or conflicting ideas. Hence, what happened with David Harvey is that, well, look, I was loyal to the union that was trying to do this, but me as an academic and was looking at this from a different lens, like, I wasn't trying to undermine them. I was actually trying to help them. And by me analyzing how their workplace, like, maybe you should, rather than fight for the job that you have, fight for a better living wage, or you should use materials that aren't going to negatively affect the environment. As soon as you challenge the I guess the higher ups within that structure of that, because they were so used to the authority established within this place or within this space, they almost immediately didn't want to hear anything from outside that structure. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I find this interesting that this kind of particular term, we've basically traded the place and space structures within our unions, within our community wealth building projects, within our cooperatives, but we've just transposed it and put it into online spaces, and it's exactly the same. And that's one side of the spectrum. And then the other side of the spectrum, which I was hoping to also get into, was I was reading a recent book by Bregman, and he was talking about current politicians and at least what your Chris Catrones or your Douglas Lanes would say is the millennial left, that the sort of people that talk about how in politics today, left-leaning parties have to be practical, whichever whatever they mean by that. But it's this phrase which he pulled out, which he called underdog socialist. And this is where my quote that's on the slide comes in. The viewpoint of the underdog socialist is that the neoliberals have mastered the game of reason, judgment, and statistics, leaving the left with emotion. Its heart is in the right place. Underdog socialists have a suffet of compassion and find prevailing policies deeply unfair. Seeing the welfare state crumbling to dust, they rush in to salvage what they can. But when push comes to shove, the underdog socialist caves in to the arguments of the opposition, always accepting the premise of which the debate takes place. So the classic one of this is, say a conservative comes into a debate and they throw a conababble and like basically jargon at this left-leaning like party candidate, for example, and they give ultimatums. So they're like, oh well, in this topic, guns or butter, which is what you prefer? Are you going to increase the military output, or are you going to these dole bludgers increase their pensions and that sort of thing? The irony being is that, well, does it have to be guns or butter? Can't you have both?
Yeah.
It's
Don't make me choose.
basically, yeah, exactly. Like it's a false equivalency, or at least it's a false ultimatum where they're like, well, there's only so much your budget can withhold. Like, why do you have to choose one or the other? Well, it's like, no, I probably just have to not give as much tax breaks to the rich, and then I can have my guns and butter. Again, I show this as I think this is the other side of the spectrum, where you have political parties that are completely compromised. Don't get me wrong, I feel like that's ironic, me saying that, being part of the Labour Party, but I digress. But yes, like there's the other side of the spectrum where I feel like there are parties, or at least people, that have completely lost who they are in the act of compromising. So surely there has to be a golden mean, or at least an in-between or hybrid, where rather than being completely down the militant particularism where you're stuck within your structure of place and space, or being completely compromised and being completely compromised and at least losing your sense of self. Sure, I'm not a genius, but I feel like we need to establish whatever the new vision is right down the middle.
Yeah. And that's like, if we can go back to something you said earlier about a sense of belonging. And like there is a sense of belonging in this kind of sectarian leftist socialist world, and like you either belong to our group and our interpretations of things and you don't question it, or you're with them and all of those non-believers out there, those infidels and heretics and like all that sort of stuff. So like this sense of belonging is...
Yeah, look, sorry for cutting you off, but like I thought the whole point of leftism, at least anti-capitalist, socialist, communist, like those sort of ideals, is that rather than there being belonging, there is no belonging, as in everything is egalitarian, everything is equal. Like if everything's equal, then like there is no need for belonging.
Yes, and that's the thing. And where I was going with what I was saying was, where's the solidarity in the us versus them belonging scenario. You belong to this group or you belong to that group, and we don't see eye to eye, and we're never going to get along because you're wrong. Like you've read that wrong, or like you haven't even read that. You just don't know what you're talking about, like kind of thing. But like, according to who? Like, if you really were Marxist or a follower of Marx's literature and his teachings and all that sort of stuff, if you were really just socialist, then like you would do away with the sectarian nonsense. Like a healthy debate is great, don't get me wrong, but not the us versus them kind of stuff. Because there is only one distinction when it comes down to socialism and traditional leftism, let's call it, is you are working class or you're another type of class. You're either lumpen proletariat or you're bourgeois or you're petty bourgeois or something like that. Like it really was, if you are in the working class or affiliate with the working class and you're socialist, then like all the various factions and beliefs and systems within that, they all should be working together, uniting. Like that's it. That's it right there. And like I think that ethos, that fundamental understanding, he's gone. Like I know we've talked about this many times, kind of thing, and I always bring up this idea of where's the solidarity, but it's true. Like if you're looking for, if you really want to define yourself as a socialist and a this and a that and all that sort of stuff, well, like really boil it down to its core. It is about there being a class distinction, and the working class needs to be united in one way or another. And at the moment, with the way that these people have been talking in the chat, the people we've experienced in conferences, um, just people out there generally, like this union that you're talking about, when someone comes in and tries to give them an outside opinion in order to improve what they're doing, if it hasn't come from their dogma, then it's just like, get out of here, man. You don't know what it's like. You're not one of us. Like that is anti-socialist. That is anti-Marxist. That is anti whatever you want to call it, anti-revolutionary. It's not anti-capitalist. It's definitely not that. It's just tribal nonsense. It's just, you're in this team or, get out. That is completely antithetical, I believe, to socialism and traditional leftism. There shouldn't be any of those distinctions. You should be able to have healthy debates with people, and you shouldn't be hating on someone. Like at the end of the day, we're all like fighting the same enemy here, man. Like
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like, come on. Like, give a guy a break. Like, we should be able to discuss these things, but all have the same common enemy. Not each other, but like the capitalist ruling class or the imperialistic nations, or like whatever you want to target, this corporation or that state institution. There should be at least commonality in the enemy, and the enemy's not other working people. Let me just say it.
Uh, Look, this is just me spitballing, but I'm just wondering, like, I guess not necessarily the sectarianism, but this. I guess it's the classic joke whenever you think of leftism, where it's like, oh, when you have um three socialists walk into a room and they have a debate, and then when they walk back out, you'll have three new interpretations of what socialism is.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that sort of joke. I wonder if we've been so used to the capitalist mode for so long, and it's been so good at creating markets, or at least creating identities in order to have the capitalist mode keep churning on as much as it can, producing commodities or producing things that feed back into the system, that because these original 20th century interpretations of of socialism, communism, whatever ism you want to put them under, we've gotten to the point where it's almost as if there's a Marxist market. There's a
I
socialism
was
market.
hoping that's
Oh,
where you were going with that. There has been a
yeah,
commodification of the
yeah,
leftist movement. And like
yes.
you pick your supplier and you get down with that commodity that commodity. You get down with that brand of socialism and leftism because, that appeals to you as a consumer. But like we aren't consumers, we are revolutionaries. We are anti-capitalists, and our only drive is not to belong with this group because they make me feel good at the end of the day. It's the end goal, which is revolution.
Mm.
Yes, the market system, which has been imposed upon us and absolutely ingrained in our psyche, has produced a market for socialism. 4IS, write a book. Goddamn, I want to read it.
The Marxist market.
The Marxist market. Oh my God. Yeah, I wonder if anyone's ever like written a meme on that or like, put those two together. You can't spell market without, Marx in there or something like that. Like the names are almost, it's scary actually. I love it. I love it. I love it. 4IS, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Okay. Actually, I'm a bit surprised that hasn't been a Chris Cutrone and Douglas Lane
Yeah, yeah,
topic.
yeah, yeah. We'll
But
have to get on the emails and get onto them about that.
okay, no worries. And with that, I think that is a good final point to go on to what is that synthwave art. So this week I was basically
What is that?
maintaining the rage for the underdog socialist, and it gave us
Wow.
Austin Powers yelling at someone.
Yeah, yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Yeah. It's like a 1960s, I don't know, rock band. Yeah, with
I'm
headphones
not
on,
sure.
but they're
Yeah,
they're
I'm
maintaining the rage. That's for sure. They're
what if
maintaining it.
Austin Powers like punk? Like
I don't
but I
know.
don't
Yeah.
get the outfit. I don't know.
Look, again, like we just will never know what the AI was thinking then. But like it is delivered gold once again for us. Once again. Cryptic as always.
Of course. And with that, everyone, remember to keep thinking and keep learning. And to sign us off, I'll give it to you, Mr. A.
Thank you very much for IS, and to all of you out there, please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.